We could probably just go ahead and get started if you're ready.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds good. So hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Klocke. I work at CTAA. I am our communications director. Before here, so I should say I've been here for about 4.5 years. Before here, I was working on Capitol Hill for a member out of Nebraska. So I've been very, very in tune with rural issues, policy issues for a long time. And I was very fortunate to get to meet with a number of rural stakeholders back in my political days. We worked a lot with the Farmers Association or Agricultural Associations, things like that. So I was very happy 4.5 years ago to make the move to CTA, but that is kind of my background. And I should also highlight too, in my position on the Hill, I was fortunate to be able to actually meet with our constituents and translate those meetings and those notes to my boss. So I did a lot of these meetings, meeting directly with constituents, and I know what to look for. And I got to be able to develop a really good eye for what translated well to my boss, what didn't, and things like that. So I am going to jump in. A lot of concerns that we hear when people start lobbying or doing advocacy is, well, I get paid with federal funds and I'm not allowed to lobby, so therefore I can no longer, or I can't meet with any elected officials. So I just wanted to kind of break up the difference. What is lobbying and what is advocacy? So lobbying is where you are asking a member of Congress or any elected official to pass or deny a pass, yay or nay, to a specific piece of legislation. So if you went to an elected official and said, hey, HR 1, I don't like it, please vote against it, that would be considered lobbying. However, advocacy is viewed as general education. So you could say how that HR 1 bill would impact you if it were to pass or if it were not to pass, but you cannot influence the decision that the elected official would make. So we can all advocate, all of us can be advocates for public transit, and it wouldn't impact, we wouldn't be considered lobbyists or things like that. So what is effective communication with an elected official and local stakeholders? It's really important to speak their language. They do not understand any type of jargon or acronyms. So, come to them with mutual respect and understanding, even if you may not agree with some of the things that they have passed or denied. It is really important to come to them with open mind and really be just respectful and understanding about where they're coming from, and the conversation from there will go really well. Why do we need to communicate with our elected officials? And I should say too, I definitely come from a federal background, but in my presentation, I will touch on local and state as well, not just federal. So elected officials, let's say we'll just cover all of your city councils, your state senators, your House members, things like that. So why do we need to communicate with these members? Well, it's really necessary for change. I think one of the big things that Scott and I advocate for in general with our members is we never want an elected official to say that they didn't hear from transit or they didn't hear from us. It is very, very important that we build ourselves a seat at the table, even if it's not offered or invited. And it's important for them to hear from us and keep that conversation going. So it's really necessary for change. It helps relationship building. One of the best things I loved about my previous job was I got to learn more about our constituents, more about our groups, and I could relate that to my boss, who would then go and support grand openings or shout out to them on Twitter or newsletters or help them with something. So it really does help to create that local relationship connection. And finally, shared priorities. You never know what an elected official will think or want or what they might care about as a priority unless you talk to them. So even if I'll get into what happens if they don't think transit's a priority, but we won't, we'll wait for that. So it's really important, as I mentioned, to connect. It connects the local issues and it really educates elected officials. They are supposed to be the gatekeeper and remember everything about a million things. So it's hard for them to stay on top of nuclear security and potentially aerospace engineering and also public transit. So our role is really to educate, make sure that they are up to date with our world, what's new in it, what funding is like, what funding do we need, what's going on with electric vehicles, things like that, things that they might not be able to grasp on right away. It's just pure education that's really important. So you might be asking, how can I find them? So here I have a couple links. For the House, they have a very handy zip code calculator. So if you go to that website, find your rep, you type in your zip code and it'll show you what congressional district you sit in and who your representative is. For the Senate, Iowa is represented by Senator Grassley and Senator Ernst. And for your local and state, this handy website dials down into the counties and the cities and will lead you to their local site. So that way you can see who your city council members are. So this is really important. I want to highlight here to start off with that we are lucky as an industry that transit is incredibly nonpartisan. It shouldn't be partisan. Our issue spans political boundaries. And to that end, I do want to make a quick note that for any elected official, they are not allowed to blend their political world. So think campaigns, TV, radio funding, and those kinds of issues with their job at Congress or on city council or in the state Senate. Those two are not allowed to blend or to talk. So you will never see on a congressional website, Senator Joni Ernst, Republican. That's not allowed to happen. But if you went to her campaign site or did some more research, you might be able to find, or you will be able to find where their political lines are. So learn your audience. What do we mean by that? It is incredibly critical to research them, their priorities, what they stand for, what they have voted on. So for example, we go to a lot of transportation and infrastructure committee meetings. I typically don't engage much, what I would assume would be the big urban systems, thinking New Jersey, the members that sit in New York. But one of the members I met, his name is Donald Payne out of New Jersey. His whole thing was all about NJ Transit, and we needed to build a tunnel to New York. But through talking with him and doing some further research, I actually learned he was a bus driver for children with special needs. And so he got our issues right away once we were able to make that connection. Like rural transit isn't just, XYZ. It isn't just what you think of in your head as these old buses transporting seniors to the community center. It is really a much larger issue. And he got it once we were able to make that connection. Another example I have about doing a lot of research is Representative Tom Cole. He is out of Oklahoma. He is one of the 4 members of Congress with a Native American background. He's with the Chickasaw Nation. Doing some research for our Hill Day that was a couple of months ago when I pair our board members with their member of Congress, and then we go and advocate for transit for a day. One of my board members, Kendra McGady, out of Pelivan Transit, she works a lot with the Cherokee Nation. She is Cherokee. And so I was trying to figure out how can we talk to Tom Cole that's outside of just, the typical ask for funding. And when we were able to make that tribal connection, we were able to educate him so much on tribal transit issues, what tribal transit does for not just within their tribes, but for the greater communities. And we were able to put in, the conversation went so well that he gave us an appropriations form and we were able to submit a community action project request. So you never know where you're going to start, but it's important to start somewhere and definitely do your research. I will also say that as we go through this presentation, you'll see lots and lots of examples of communications. It is helpful to know their party background so you can kind of tailor your messaging towards them. So for example, right now, Republicans really, really are hot on regulations, and that's a good topic for us to talk on. That's many of our rural and smaller systems are overburdened with regulations, or the Democrats who are really hot on the environment and clean air. We have a lot that we can relate to with that as well. Even when it comes down to crafting your materials, which we'll go through here in a second, the Republicans, they really love data. They really love numbers. My former boss used to say, I don't want to hear how much money you want. I want to hear what that money is going to do and who that money is going to impact. So the Republicans, they love data. The Democrats really love anecdotes, personal stories, and I'll share some examples of that later. But the perfect blend that if we can achieve is blending the data and the anecdotes together in your messaging to these elected officials. So here I wanted to do a little example on research. So if we go to Senator Ernst's website, we see she has her priorities. And I dug through this earlier and she doesn't mention transit. So I'm thinking, okay, well, how can I relate as an advocate for transit to Senator Ernst? Well, I see here, if I go down a little more, she's interested in healthcare. She's interested in seniors
Following the required 18 behaviors is a condition of your
veterans.
employment.
So here I can think, okay, if I am a rural or small system, I can quantify easily how many veterans trips I'm providing. Am I transporting them to VA clinics? How many seniors am I transporting? Am I able to help them gain access to food, to their medical appointments, to get their hair done? So it's really, you can easily make these connections, but it does take a little bit of background research, and you shouldn't be discouraged if you don't see public transit as one of their priorities, because it is definitely possible to always make that connection. And let me go back to my PowerPoint. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, okay, let me see if I can share that. I see that we couldn't share the website. So here is the website that Senator Ernst has on her priorities. So if we go down, we can see, you know, public transit's not listed, but we do have seniors and we do have veterans. And every congressional member has a website like this. They have who they are and their priorities, generally what committees they sit on and what caucuses they're a part of. So that's just something to think about when you're doing your research. So that's research. We know our audience now. We know how we're going to connect to Senator Ernst. We're going to connect with her on veterans, seniors, and healthcare access. So now that we know all this, how are we going to communicate with her? So now we're going to develop a one-pager. What a one-pager is a piece of paper that is one page, and it has definitely lots of great high-level summary information. A lot of us want to share everything about what we do and all the things that we do and all the fabulous things that we do, which are also great and important. However, a lot of the people that we will be meeting with, most elected officials, community stakeholders, they don't necessarily have the time to dissertate and discern what is in your materials. So a one-pager is a really great way to quick and easily highlight what you need, who you are, and your future. So as I said, it really needs to be clear, concise, and short. It needs to be a little sexy to grab their attention. We need some photos, we need some nice colors, we need things that make sense in the context of what you are trying to communicate. And always, I think we all know how to do this, be respectful throughout all communications and throughout all of our materials. So what do we include in our communications? Definitely personal photos. A lot of our members ask, well, Taylor, like, I don't have a large budget for marketing. How can I get photos? Ride one of your vehicles one day, bring your iPhone and take lots of pictures. Take pictures of your drivers, take pictures of your staff inside your facilities, take pictures of your maintenance working, take pictures of the facilities themselves. You don't have to have $1 million. You just have to have some time to be able to take and really get out in your community and take lots of pictures that are yours too. People have used the same stock photos for our industry lots and lots of times. And so it's definitely important to personalize it and make it your own. Include local stories. In a couple of slides here, I'll show an example of a campaign that highlights writers and what those writers were writing to and what it meant for them. And that really ties into relevant testimonials. I mean, if you can get a couple quotes from some key customers, some key areas you're going, that would also be very cool to include. Any charts or conceptual data, I think it's hard for anybody to digest a lot of numbers. So this is a really fun way to make sure that you're getting your point across in a good and factual way. And I should also highlight, we don't need to be dishonest in what we're sharing in our communications to elected officials when we are advocating. They will somehow or another find out. We want to make sure we're always honest in the data we're sharing. We're always honest in the stories, things like that. Something that I am very guilty of, no jargon. We get so in the weeds and we think that everybody knows what we're talking about, and we don't all the time. So it's really important not to include any jargon, no acronyms. My former boss used to just stop listening if somebody said an acronym, and I know he is not alone. So this is what we want to include. Here's a really fun example of a one pager that looks good. And it also has really great data visualization. So their branding is on point with their logo. All the colors make sense. We have pop out numbers. All the graphs make sense. This is one that I made last month to highlight rural transit safety data. And here we were obviously trying to get across that rural transit is one of the safest modes of transportation. It is the safest mode outside of air transportation. So we really wanted to highlight that. We also wanted to highlight that it is very rarely the transit agency's fault when a fatality happens. So like I said, this one's on brand with our logo colors. I tried to use as many data graphics as possible, so it's not just a ton of numbers, but I also tried to put the data in context by having a high-level summary. Brooke mentioned earlier the STIC program. So this is a one-pager that we made a couple of years ago on STIC and why we needed to be increased, which it actually did in the reauthorization bill. But this is something that we made for a representative that, I'm blanking on her name, but she represented the Jewel. So we plugged in their very, personal information. What would happen if the Jewel received increased STIC funding? Well, they could get a possible increase of $130,000 if with this funding. So it makes it really real when they see what the impact will be in their own community and not just, for systems across the country. This is the anecdote campaign I mentioned earlier. This is out of CASTA. This is just a brief kind of social media campaign, but you can definitely share it with your electeds as well. It is individuals taking the services to places, how it has impacted them over the years, where they're going, things like that. So it's fun to share, and it really personalizes that data point for them. Here's another one out of CASTA. This one I really like because it is drilled down data. It is very easy to see, okay, I represent District 1. Wow, my district has provided over 100 million trips this year and went over 64,000 miles. Now, I think what this could be doing better of is where the hot spots and locations were, where are all the trips going, who are the majority of your riders, really kind of putting a face to these numbers. But as I said, Democrats and Republicans like numbers, Republicans like them a little bit more. But this is a great snapshot and way to share district information. So now if you've developed your materials, it's important to get an outside perspective. Can somebody understand it? Do the pictures make sense? Are you sharing a picture of a football game with a one pager on veteran rural transit? Does that make sense? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Does it look good? Does the information flow? Does it make sense when we're going from one section of the one pager to another? I've been doing communications now for 9 years, and I still have somebody always look at what I'm providing, especially to masses, and if it looks good and makes sense to them. Back to the learn your audience comment. I mean, if they are not an expert in this field like we are, they are going to be reading at it with really bare bones understanding. So it's important that we go through it at very high level and it makes sense to somebody who is not an expert in our field. So we have all the materials. What's next? It is time to connect. So I think with COVID, we've all gotten burned out with the Zooms and the phone calls, and this is something that should never be an email. When we want to connect with an elected official or community stakeholder for the very first time, it is critical to have an in-person connection. This will only enhance the relationship that you build with them. It will put faces to names, and it'll make everything so much more personal. Another way to connect with elected officials, offer tours of your routes or your facilities. I know I spoke to Julia, I think it was a year ago or so, about a ride the bus event that they had with their electeds. And that's a fabulous way to show them what's going on. Sometimes our buses look empty, but they're really not if you just ride on it for a route. See where everybody's going, meet the people who are riding our vehicles. They also love a good photo opportunity. So having the option to come to a facility grand opening or a unveiling of a new shelter or something like that is huge for them. They love that. Anything that they can do to make their lives a little bit easier, give back to the community and have some good photo ops and connect with constituents is a big deal. Once you've established that baseline connection, I think it's really important to have some sort of quarterly or half yearly meeting with them. This is just something that you can have on the books. That way, say not a lot has changed in the last quarter. Well, then you can push that meeting off and wait until the next quarter. And in a little bit, I'll talk about how important it is to have regular communication, but having established quarterly or bi-yearly meetings are really important to just always check in with each other. How can I as an agency help you? And how can you as an elected official help me? So this is kind of nitty-gritty details about your initial meeting. So say that you reached out to Senator Ernst for the first time. You set up a meeting and you have your one pager and you're ready to go and it goes great, and you're leaving the meeting and you get home back to Iowa from the Hill. It's really important and critical that you always follow up with the staffer who you met with. You always want to give the materials again. It's very easy to lose things surprisingly, the Hill is still in the Stone Ages and they operate 100% on paper. So having electronic materials is huge. So that way they can always have a copy. And it's really important to answer any lingering questions that you couldn't during a meeting. We never want to lie and say when they asked us a question that we don't know 100% the answer to. So my go-to whenever I'm asked a question in a Hill meeting or with an elected official, I always say, I'm not 100% sure, but I would love to double check my facts and get some resources together, and I'll make sure to follow up with you. So that is always very appropriate and a very easy thing to do. And of course, thank them for their time and interest. All electeds at every level are busy people. And so any kind of time or energy that we spend together, should definitely be appreciated. So this is what I was mentioning earlier. We need to continue relationships, not just our established meetings. Is there a news article that you were in? Send it to them. Send them to the staffer that you know. Was there a policy that you've seen on the Hill that could, or state or locally, that could really impact you or your system? And that could be negative or positive. They want a good pat on the back if they can help you, but they also want to help you. And if it's negative, they need to know, and they don't know unless they don't hear from you. Invite them to participate in your next community event. That doesn't always have to be something sexy like a facility opening. It can be, you have a local food drive that you are helping provide donations for, invite them to that. The only thing you can get is no. And most of the time they will probably say yes if it works for their schedule. So have continued relationships. When I was on the Hill, the best relationships I had, people that would email me just with news articles or a snippet of something that was going on with them. It made my life as a staffer much easier because I could, write something about them, help them with press releases. I could tell my boss would be super happy. He would do shout outs on social media. And having that established relationship is the only way that you can move forward in asking for things in the future. So right now we are in a very grateful time that we just had reauthorization passed, and we have a few years still until the next reauthorization. So right now we're just working on that relationship building. We're sharing positive stories, negative stories, things that we think that they should know about. And so that way, when reauthorization comes, we already have that long established relationship, and they won't be thinking that we're just another ask for them to check. We are friends, we are partners in this, and they will be much more open to helping you with certain policy issues in the future if you have that longstanding relationship. So now I want to chat about letters of support. So this is something that we work a lot with in our TA centers, and we oftentimes help too with providing letters of support. And why is it helpful to have these in your back pocket? So the first step is to create an ask for them. So one of the reasons I think letters of support are so important is because when it's time for you to write grants or time for you to ask your policy maker for something in reauthorization, or you need help with local match with your city council, you kind of have these already in your back pocket. Oh, thank you for doing the TA centers. Yes, that is the NCMM, the NCAT acronyms that Scott mentioned before. See, I'm not good with I get too in the weeds with the jargon. So who do you ask? Who's important to ask? local community partners for sure. So who are the hotspots of locations where you are transporting people? Is that medical clinics, hospitals, community centers, VA clinics, hotspot of large employers that you help out? Asking them for a letter of support is massive because it really puts a face to your services. Local elected officials. I have seen numerous people get letters of support from their federal congressional member. Same with their senators. Same with the local and state. I think they're happy to do it. If they have that one established relationship with you, but also if you need to. One of the things too that's really important is creating a template. So one of the things that I personally learned recently, CTAA is embarking or has embarked on getting a Buy America waiver for minivans and vans. And we have reached out to all the state DOTs and said, hey, can you write a letter of support? 99% came back to me and said, I need a template. You would make my life so much easier. That is not something I had considered before. So creating a template is something that just helps people out and makes it easier for them to put everything in context and actually helps you get a better idea of what you want. So I actually included ours as an example. You can see here that we have some very high level information about why we need this Buy America waiver, who, is in charge of doing this, what it would do for our services, why it's important in face of the cutaway issue that Scott was mentioning earlier. And then I make a very clear paragraph here on, this is what I want you to say. This is what would be helpful for us if you mention these things. So in this specific instance, I ask people to highlight, what is their lack of availability? How many canceled contracts have you had? Do you have cost overruns? Have you had any delivery delays? What's your statewide backlog like? I really prompted people to get down to the nitty gritty of their own personal experience, which is something that I can't do for them. And then, ending it. And I typically keep this on just a blank Word document so they can put their logo, make the branding things that they need. And it just makes it really easy for your stakeholders to fill something like this out in relation to your letter of support. So now you have these letters, what do we do? Well, we definitely want to share them and write them into grant opportunities. I think it does nothing but help with the FTA if they see that you have all of this local support and potentially local match here listed and ready to help you. Community action projects, that is the new fancy way to say earmarks. So earmarks have been back in the Congress for a couple of years now, 2 years, and these can only help you with your member of Congress getting specified funding for your agency. So this is congressionally directed spending that would go straight to your state DOT. That's just for you. And so if you wish to engage in community action projects, having letters of support would be nothing but helpful. Your member would love to see everybody on board and how it's helping you. Like I said, federally electeds, and I would share them on your website. Senators, I've seen when I was going through Senator Ernst's website or Senator Grassley's, they had letters of support that we have shared for certain authorization bills, things like that. Everybody shares them. I think it does nothing but show your customers, your clients, your trip takers, your riders, all the things that you're doing, all the people that support you, and that you're not just working alone. So that is a very high level overview of how to be an advocate 101. Something that we as an industry, I think, don't do super fabulously is merging our messaging. We have always worked very well with IPTA, the Iowa Public Transit Association, the Bus Coalition. We work with APTA, the American Public Transit Association. But we aren't always fabulous at telling each other when we're advocating for what should our messaging be? Should we be focusing on the values? Should we be focusing on ridership? Should we be focusing on a certain issue? So if you are embarking on your journey and becoming an advocate, I think something that's important for you to hear is that you're not alone. We have done this for many, many years. So have, all of your local partners in Iowa, or your federal partners and state partners too. And we would be more than happy to help identify representatives that would be beneficial for you to meet with, or issues that you should be focusing on. What should my messaging look like? What should my messaging include? What are priorities that I should be talking about? CTAA releases a list of legislative priorities every year. I think this year our report was 10 pages. It was too long, but that's how many things that we are working on and how many ways that we are trying to better the industry. So that is what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions or anything like that.
Thank you, Taylor. If anybody has any questions, they can go ahead and put it in the chat or raise your hand, and we can certainly get that answered.
I have a question. I always have a question. Hi, Taylor.
I'm ready.
So if you are not in the transportation business, but transportation is important to the service that you're advocating for, how do you combine the two so that they know that yes, I'm just going to use healthcare, like say you're in healthcare, but transportation is really important. Like, how do you advocate for something that isn't your priority into what is your priority, if that makes sense? Because we would like to do that as well as transportation providers. Like, how can we also advocate for, I don't know, additional funding for something like, seniors or something like that, because we want to do that as well. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. So I think it goes back to what Scott was mentioning earlier too, when it comes to values over ridership. So in the specific healthcare example, one of the things I've seen work really, really well is a healthcare provider saying, this is how many no-shows I had pre-partnership with HRDA. And then post-partnership with HRDA, these are how many no-shows I have now. Look how much HRDA has helped me, and this is how much I have saved because of that. I think the healthcare world, as Scott mentioned, collects so much data, and especially financial data, that it is important to see, like, because of HRDA, I am able to save X amount of money, which I can then put into these X amount of services. And so I think vice versa, for us to advocate for other industries such as healthcare or seniors or veterans, we can outline, what are we helping these populations achieve? Are we able to help veterans go to more job interviews or more clinic things, or are we able to help seniors access more grocery stores? I think that is that's what's helpful, is really the anecdotal part and nailing down the hotspot centers that we are transporting these populations to. Yeah, I think it is easier the other way around because it's our data is tough, right? NTD data is not always the easiest to distill and be able to integrate. So, but there are a number of ways, and I'd be happy to connect with anybody who is wanting to advocate for one way or the other.
Thank you. And Taylor's a wealth of information. So, you can either raise your hand and talk or put something in the chat. She'd be happy to help. Even if it's not about necessarily transportation and you want to talk, like how to better advocate for whatever agency that you are with, she'll be able to help you with that as well.
And we use we collect quite a bit of success stories. Can you kind of give some tips on best ways to kind of collect those success stories and kind of capture the writer's messages?
Definitely. So I will use just a very personal example. At CTAA, we had our Emerging Leaders Academy a couple months ago, and I wanted to make sure I captured the people that had a fabulous time and the people that had a not so fabulous time, but I wanted to make sure I captured their input so I could sell it easier and help get more people for next year. And so what I do is I really try to sit down and then have a very brief 2-minute conversation. What did you love? What did you not love? Give me the high level. And then I will reach out to them via email so that way they can put a little more thought to it the next week after. In terms of writers, I think it's great to do in-person survey collection on vehicles, at stops, things like that. And then communicating that, I think you guys do a fabulous job of social media campaigns. That's always really helpful. And I think writing about it, having blog posts, sharing it with local news outlets. That way more of your community stakeholders can see this is the kinds of people that are writing HRDA and know it is not just, seniors or people that have no other choice, because we don't believe in that here. And I think it's important for other people to see that. So I'm a big component of news outlets, web. You know, you guys also do a great job with email marketing campaigns, sharing those stories there too, I think is important.
Thank you. Any other questions for Taylor?
Well, I shared my email, so if you have something you want to ask, please feel free to shoot me an email. Also, I would be remiss if Scott nor I didn't mention our expo next month. It is a fabulous, fabulous event in Oklahoma City, so very close to Iowa. And it will have loads of great content. I think we have over 45 workshops this year on everything under the sun. So if you have any questions about that too, let me know. Otherwise, I am easily reachable by email or phone.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, Taylor.